Everybody, Jimmy Smith. I did not intend to do 3 parts to this thing, but the evil in MMA continues because of you guys in the comments section. You guys brought up some names that I had forgotten about, and especially, what was it, Yuri Braga on my YouTube channel. I want to give credit where it's due. It was Yuri Braga 2575 who brought up Mikel Falcao, and I'd forgotten completely about him because the story happened in Brazil. So it just didn't come to mind instantly. Before I get into it, you guys asking about Jon Jones. You're asking about Conor McGregor. Everybody knows that stuff. We all know the same stuff. Everybody in the comment section could tell you about everything Jon Jones has done. The thing about this channel is I'm giving you an insight, being on the other side of the curtain a little bit, and I don't know anything more about the Jon Jones situation than you do. I'm not saying he's a great guy. I'm not saying Conor McGregor's a great guy. I'm not saying they don't deserve to be on this list. It's just I don't have any information you don't have about those guys. So a lot of the names you guys talk about, why don't you do so-and-so, why don't you do so-and-so, I can't tell you. You can look it up on YouTube or Wikipedia and know what I know. I don't know anything more about Jon Jones's issues than you do. So what I try to talk about is names where I have, even if I don't have personal experience, more of a behind-the-scenes story than you guys do because I've watched so many freaking fights and been around so many people. So anyway, that's why. I know some people put Hushimar Polyares on there for snapping everybody's limbs afterward. Sucks, but I wouldn't call him an evil person necessarily. He is out of his mind, from what I've heard, because he was Brazilian top team, and I was Brazilian top team for a minute in Long Beach. I was training with Carlson Gracie, Brazilian top team. And they know Hushimar Polyares, and I'm like, dude, he's just, it's not evil. He's just not there. And he's just an idiot. And he's just, it's not so much his intention to do something terrible. He's just not very bright and just doesn't know how to do anything else. So anyway, that's my response to to somebody asking about Hushimar Polyares. So, Mikel Falcao was a fighter at 185 in Bellator, won a tournament, and from Brazil. So one of the things was, I had a little story about him. When he first met me, he was a fan of Fight Quest. It's called Masters of Combat in Brazil. And so when I met him for the first time, I was at CVS I was at a drugstore getting something. And he was there with his coach. And to kind of say hi, he double legs me in the middle of CVS. And I'm like, oh crap. And I grab him. We kind of start grappling on the floor of this store. And, because he doesn't speak English, so he's just trying to, say hi to me and, grabs me. And I'm like, whoa, and I go over the top for a guillotine, we start rolling around. And just goofing around. And his coach kind of pulls him off, and I was like, hey, man, how you doing? He's like, oh, yeah, man, I'm a big fan of your show and all this stuff. I mean, obviously through his translator. But anyway, he ends up winning a tournament in Bellator. He beats a guy named, he gets in the finals, he beats a guy, he fights a guy named Andreas Spang, who were in the ring, and he's about to face off with Andreas Spang. I go to get a translator to translate what he's going to say, and Spang pushes him. Spang did this all the time. And Falcao goes after him, and I have the microphone in one hand, and I kind of sprawl, because he kind of tries to get underneath me, and I sprawl and kind of underhook Falcao, and I'm holding him up and, kind of preventing them from fighting while I'm trying to talk my way through this thing. And they get him separated and everything's fine. And then a lot of people said, man, why'd you do that, or how'd you do that? And I go, I knew he wasn't going to hit me. If I thought he was going to punch me in the face, I'm not getting between two guys, that size in a million years. But he had already said, hey, man, it's nice to meet you. I'm a big fan. So I didn't worry about him punching me in the face. So it looked really heroic. It really wasn't. I knew Spang might hit me in the back of the head, but I wasn't worried about Falcao hitting me in the face. So anyway, on to the bad part. He ends up losing to Alexander Shlemenko by knockout for the Bellator middleweight championship. Then he's in Brazil. He's drunk with a friend, hits on a girl in a gas station, 7-Eleven type place. Ends up smacking her with his wallet. When she says no, she says something to him no. And he smacks her. It's on video. He smacks her with his wallet. Well, as him and his friend are going out, this girl's friends, male friends who are with her, maybe 4 or 5 of them, come inside the store. They start a brawl. I just rewatched it to do this show, obviously, and Falcao was clearly drunk because these guys are hitting him. He's like not really reacting quickly. It's clear that he's inebriated. So a brawl starts inside the gas station store, spills outside. The guys get 2x4s, and he's with a friend. They beat the friend damn near to death. So you don't see all the faces, you can't see individually what's happening except to this one guy who's his friend. He gets hit with the 2x4, knocked out, and they just beat him and 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 beat him. Apparently, he was permanently disabled. Falcao just got minor injuries. Although he was drunk, he was with it enough to defend himself and not really get beat up too badly. But they beat his friend damn near to death. And so Bellator cuts him because of that. He ends up continuing to fight mostly, Russian promotions all over the place, brought in to lose to big guys for the most part. Ended up on a 4 or 5 fight losing streak at the end of his career. Then in January 2022, he ends up getting stabbed to death in his hometown in Brazil, outside a bar somewhere. So this was a guy who just couldn't control himself, ended up causing trouble, and it got him killed. But the major thing that was news here briefly was the thing in Brazil where he started a fight by hitting this woman. Friends came, beat him up, really beat his friend up. And that was it. Got cut. That was the end of his career in the United States. Continued for a little bit before he got killed. Don't have any details about his stabbing in Brazil. If somebody in the comment section is Brazilian and knows the story, please let me know. But I just know that he got stabbed in Brazil outside of a bar. So, another one that you guys brought up, somebody I did train with back in the Team Punishment days in the early 2000s, Rico Rodriguez. It's hard to describe how big Rico was at the time and how potentially big he could have been as UFC champion back then. Beats Randy Couture for the title. Beat Jeff Monson. He beat Andrei Arlovsky. Beat some big names. So, as I said, defeats Randy Couture for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. A big favorite against Tim Sylvia. Gets walked into the octagon by Tito Trinidad. He's Puerto Rican, Rico Rodriguez. I remember he was with Vin Diesel before the fight, like announcing the fight. He was in the crowd with Vin Diesel. Like, big for that era. For that time and place, somebody that big is pretty rare. And trained with Team Punishment, like I said, Tito Ortiz and that team. And I was there at the time. And he was going to be the next big thing. And took on Tim Sylvia. Tim Sylvia knocks him out. Then he takes on Pedro the Rock Hizzo. Loses by decision there. That was it for his career in the UFC. Never fought in the UFC again. Bounced around a lot. Came to Bellator. I called this fight against Seth Petrozelli. Went to the IFL. Fought once in Pride. He bounced around a bit and then became, much like Travis Fulton in my previous video, he became a guy who just fought every week. He has 82 pro fights. Rico Rodriguez. I think he retired in 2019-ish, so a few years back. But had a million fights after that. Was just one of those, hey, I sell tickets and I'm going to fight every weekend and that's how I'm going to make a living. So went from kind of the top of the UFC to a journeyman really quickly. I've never seen a fall that far and that fast, ever. Where he was supposed to be it, 2 fights later he's done. So outside of the octagon, back at Team Punishment in those days, I wasn't a cool kid at Team Punishment. I wasn't part of the team that was training with guys like Tiki and Rico Rodriguez and Chuck Liddell and Tito. And I was helping out. I was a warm body they would kind of throw in there. But I didn't spend any social time with these people. I didn't hang out with them. And they partied hard. They did. You could tell that a lot of times they would come to training like, from the previous night, not getting any sleep, train and then do the same thing over and over and over again. They didn't test back then. Right? If they did test for steroids, they weren't testing for illegal drugs. You could be really dirty and be okay, right? And for a while. So Rico, from what I heard, very much part of that environment back then at Team Punishment. And so he was on the first season of Celebrity Rehab. I believe it was the first season of Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, whom I can't stand. And told a story about how he was drunk driving on a suspended license from a previous DUI. Got in a car accident with his girlfriend, thought she was dead, took her, put her in the driver's seat so he wouldn't get busted. Ended up being alive. She wasn't dead. And has an assault beef in Arizona. I forget what happened with that, but he's at last thing I recall for any kind of DUI stuff was a few years ago, 2013, 2014. It's a train wreck. Absolute train wreck. But putting your you believe dead girlfriend in the driver's seat, so you don't get the DUI. Obviously scumbag move, but in and out of trouble when it comes to drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. So Rico was one of those guys who just kind of did one of these when he didn't have to be in the gym every day training with the UFC. So anyway, Rico had some serious problems. Hopefully he's had them straightened out. But I called a couple of his fights around various places. So another one, Amar Suluev. If you guys remember him, he fought in the UFC a couple times. Fought Phil Baroni. When I did the Phil Baroni piece, in my first Evil and MMA video, I mentioned he knocked out Amar Suluev. Amar Suluev also took on Chuck Liddell at 205. A little too small for Chuck Liddell. Did well technically, was a good kickboxer, but Chuck was just too big for him. So had some wins in Pride that were notable. He beat Dean Lister. He beat Murillo Bustamante. Did have some decent wins in Pride. I called some of his fights post, meaning he had fought in M1 a few times. Fought a guy named Andrei Semenov. Anybody remembers him? He's a pretty decent fighter too. And so what we did is we were doing a compilation video for M1, like a highlight video. Well, none of those fights were recorded in English. So I had to sit in the studio and call a bunch of Amar Suluev fights. I think I called 3 of them. Retroactively. They'd already been done and I was calling them. So spent a lot of time with his team, who's Red Devil Sports Club, which is Fedor Emelianenko's team. Good fighter, very solid, especially for that era of MMA. Turns out he was allegedly really mobbed up. Got arrested in Russia for a couple of assassinations and one failed assassination of other Russian heavies, politicians, guys like that. And while he was on trial for, I believe, the third one, the assassination attempt, he got stage 4 stomach cancer and died before the trial could be completed. So he was apparently an assassin for the Russian mob. And that was obviously the allegedly twice that they know of. And so he was mobbed up and got into trouble and ended up dying of natural causes before he could be tried. So one of those guys that really, really dangerous dude. Don't want to be around him, but definitely makes this list. So that was Amar Suluev, UFC veteran, ended up being an assassin before he could be tried for it, died of cancer. Crazy story. So the next one, you guys should know this one. Thiago Silva, and a couple of people in the comment section brought up Thiago Silva. I know more about this because it's kind of my neck of the woods here in South Florida. I know some people who know the situation well, which is why I feel like I can talk about it. So Thiago Silva, his estranged wife was sleeping with another jiu-jitsu guy named Pablo Popovich, who has fantastic jiu-jitsu. He was an Abu Dhabi finalist, the only guy to beat Marcelo Garcia in his weight class in Abu Dhabi. I think that was 2009. Anyway, Thiago Silva ended up going to Pablo Popovich's gym and threatening him with a gun while there was a classroom of people there. So threatening all these people with a gun, essentially. So he leaves, goes home, cops show up, he barricades himself in his house, and SWAT ends up getting him out of there. Now, they didn't have to, he came out from what I understand. Because if he had opened fire on police, he'd be in prison right now. So from what I understand, SWAT came, they were able to talk him out of there. Now, a lot of people in the comment section were, wow, what happened with that? How did this not happen? Where he's not in prison. His estranged wife went to Brazil. They couldn't subpoena her. She wouldn't show up to testify. So without her testimony, and I know Pablo Popovich ended up teaching in the Middle East. He's teaching in the Middle East right now. I don't know if he left then, where right after this incident, he's in the Middle East. You can't subpoena someone in Dubai. It doesn't, it's toilet paper. You can't get somebody to testify in the United States if you live in a foreign country. So I know the wife left the country, and I know her testimony probably would have been pretty essential. And Pablo Popovich, I know, went from here in the United States to teach in the Middle East. So it could be the prosecutor here in South Florida just couldn't get anybody to testify. And if they won't, that's the end of it. And as I said, a subpoena in a foreign country is useless. There's no legal authority to do anything to anyone. So they couldn't make the case because both their witnesses left the country. He is one of those guys where he had, in the UFC, had problems where he was always getting popped. He beat the ever-loving crap out of Brandon the Truth Vera. If people remember that fight. I remember at some point slapped him, was like smacking him. Just absolutely creamed him. Physical monster, super duper strong, really big for the weight class. not super technical, pretty well-rounded, but not technical enough to beat the elite of the elite. And then when he was getting over that hump and starting like, okay, maybe this guy could fight for a title, he kept popping. He gave a urine sample that was apparently not a urine sample. He had used some kind of diluting chemical or something on his urine where they're like, that's a violation, and he knew he was going to pop. And then he got popped for a marijuana test after that, and then it was always something with this guy. And so the UFC wisely got rid of him. But outside of the octagon, that was the issue that really essentially sidelined his career. As he went to a rival gym with a gun, and SWAT had to go to his house and get him. But when they tried to make the case, everything fell apart. So anyway, that is it. That is number 3. Obviously, if there are a ton, I'll make something else. When someone asks, why don't I make the nicest guys in MMA? Because there are a lot of nice guys in MMA. I don't think a lot of you guys would watch it. Would find it very entertaining if I said, hey, here are the nicest guys in MMA. There are a lot of them. A lot of really good people. So anyway, it would be a long list. Appreciate you. Give me a like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.